I want to discuss a huge topic, huge. Why nothing worked so far. So I have clients that believe that they are not coachable, and the reason why they believe that is because they've done all of the programs, all of the classes, all of the therapy. I mean, spent a lot of money, a lot of time, a lot of effort, and they don't see the results. And I believe that it happens because the way we understand human condition at the moment is very limited. And when I say limited, it means that it's only one-sided. So we all heard an expression mind, body, and spirit. And this is something that we intellectually comprehend, but our civilization definitely defaults on the mental prism of consciousness. What it means is that our society reinforces intellect over intuition, logic over flow. And it's not a bad thing, but it does create a certain limitation in our own human experience because we are not just mental structures, but we are also body, we are also the energetic aspect of who we are. Some people call it soul, some people may have other words for it. What happens to us when we grow up in the Western world is that we are conditioned to default to our intellect in order to make decisions and also to perform in life. So, since very young age, we are trained to compete within the school system, within our peer group, even probably within siblings, which sets a certain dynamic internally in terms of how we actually experience this reality. And if you think about all of the technological advancements, even past 20 years, we really don't lack intellectual people. IQ is something that we have plenty of. What is missing, however, is the integrated human who can life, walk through life with life experientially, not sitting in the head. And this is what I see pretty much every day in my practice, that we are very much convinced to only trust our mental realms of awareness, and we distrust our bodies, which also makes sense because body usually carries a lot of trauma, so there is static on the line. However, what was really interesting for me to observe is that during COVID, I had to homeschool my sons, and my youngest son, who is my middle son now, was, I think, in the second grade, and they were talking about five senses. And I literally was in awe how much conviction there is behind just five senses. So we do not receive a permission to actually be multidimensional beings at a very young age. So those of us that are multisensory, those of us who have that inner knowing, are kind of like swayed away from those qualities or those capacities. And a lot of us shut down our magic. We shut down our gifts, our awareness, and we try to live this linear reality. Well, it is a distortion for our whole being to be just in the linear realm. That's why it takes tremendous amount of work and integration between the feminine and the masculine, between your inner child, inner essence, and your adult structures, between your human and divine. Those constructs of duality have to be rectified somewhere at the identity level. And most of the tools and modalities, and I've certified myself in over like 50 of them, so there is really not much out there that I either haven't practiced, experienced on myself, and tried to apply somehow either in my life or in the life of my clients. It kind of still, most of those modalities are still functioning within the realm of this linear um, experience. However, we have to give humanity permission to transcend our reliance on the mental. And it's interesting, I actually just posted something on Facebook. It talks about a Westerner who lived in Africa, and he shared with the tribe members that he cannot hear the stars. And first they thought he was joking, and then they thought that he was lying, because for them, walking with the stars and living with the nature is like foundational aspect of their human experience. They don't understand how you cannot hear the nature. It's not something that their culture allows, and that reverence of the nature, reverence of the sacredness of life is something we lost as a civilization. And I think it happened during the rise of monotheistic tradition. So the past 2000 years were not easy on Divine Mother. Like, we all understand where Heavenly Father is, in the heavens, but the scriptures or religious dogma doesn't really talk about the Divine Mother. So you may say, well, Victoria, what about Mother Mary? Well, first of all, Mother Mary was a human being. And second of all, I believe that there is a lot of distortion around Mother Mary, like her being virgin. It also creates a distortion for women, because it makes us and our sexuality is something that we should like be ashamed of or try to avoid, because in order to be an honorable woman, you're supposed to be virgin. I don't think that's a holistic approach to feminine, and I've struggled a lot with my feminine in my life, to the point that when I had my second son, I was actually very grateful that I had two boys, because masculine felt achievable, but feminine felt like such a complex matter, and I wasn't even sure where it is and how to do this feminine thing. I was completely shut down from my body, not even trusting my body. And I feel like for many women, trusting feminine is a very challenging conversation, just because it has been so violated, that trust. We lost the reverence of life. We turned into this competitive beings that look at the survival of the fittest as the modus operandi of survival in the society, which is a complete lie. We are not competitive beings. We are communal beings. And I think one of the reasons why we have such a tremendous mental health crisis is because most people actually are forced in isolation and this performance metrics, which puts them in this never ending loop of inner judgment and inner criticism. Am I good? Am I bad? Am I okay? How can I do better, 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 better? And from work with people that have accomplished tremendous, tremendous um, goals and achievements and accolades, I know that once you hit that threshold, there is a void there. So one of the biggest challenges for our society is to actually reclaim the Divine Mother, and it needs to happen collectively. And it won't happen from the White House. It has to happen as an internal integration of every woman, which puts a lot of pressure on us, women. And I love saying that I absolutely believe what Dalai Lama said, that the world is going to be saved by the Western woman, because she has the time, the space, the money, the um, opportunity to actually do the healing and do the integration. So because the Divine Mother was no longer part of the conversation, each one of us, we orphaned in a way. And what happens is that we are going and trying to understand that internal feeling of fragmentation through the mental structures and our stories, through our language. And this is one of the reasons why therapy doesn't work. I think there's a place for therapy, but anyone who's been in therapy for a long time and doesn't really see the results, one of the reasons why this happens is because when you keep talking about that story over and over and over, first you reactivate the existing trauma that was inside of you. And most of us did not have an unconditional love as part of our environment of upbringing, primarily because our parents didn't have unconditional love either. So they did the best they knew how, but they projected certain aspects of their own shadow, their own fragmentation, their own trauma on us. So that's a big piece of it. When people keep rehashing what happened in the past, it becomes their present, which actually creates their future. The second reason why therapy does not work for people is because it kind of keeps you in the experiential mental loop. It doesn't really create an integrated environment. Now, that is also a paradigm, collective paradigm that happened, I think, in 17th century. We had this philosopher, renowned Enlightenment philosopher. His name was René Descartes. He was French. He actually petitioned Catholic Church to be able to remove medicine under the umbrella of influence of the church. And it was actually a very important decision and a very important action, because prior to that, doctors could not operate on human bodies. It was considered not appropriate. The human body after death belonged to church. Therefore, medical community was stuck. They had to pretty much operate on animals, trying to comprehend the biology and the physiology of human being. So Descartes was able to advance medicine by giving medicine domain of a body, but he also outsourced the mind to psychology, and the spirit had stayed with the church. So that happened several centuries ago, but we collectively have not changed the fragmentation of that paradigm. And most of you know that if you go to the doctor, very randomly, the doctor will ask you about childhood trauma or any kind of like psychosomatic conditions that you may have, because those three paradigms are still kind of like existing in complete isolation. And I believe it's important for us to have a common ground, like a common denominator around, okay, this is my life. I'm experiencing it primarily from the mental realm because that's how I was conditioned to experience life. And it's not only mental realm, it's usually very a linear, I would even say logical realm. So no one wants to be starving artists. So even in childhood, most children are swayed to develop their left hemisphere, which is logic, reasoning. Those children that have more artistic personas, like left-handed children, they even are taught to be right-handed. I think this practice is not as predominant as it used to be, but if you think about it, what that practice did, it kind of like diminished your natural multisensory capacity and made you more linear. Why? Because in the linearity, you primarily practice cause and effect. And that's another paradigm. That's like Newtonian physics that we also have been using for many, many centuries, even though quantum physics that now becomes so popular and proves so many daily events and circumstances is just like recently became a big thing. But quantum physics always existed. It's just two paradigms of consciousness. Are you linear? Are you more indoctrinated in believing that life is cause effect, and the more you push, the more you get? Or are you quantum, where you collapse time and space and create magic and magnetize life that you desire? So in my practice, I take women, especially through the processes that emphasize their multidimensional essence, their magic, their intuition, their capacity to hear what is an authentic yes and what is an authentic no for them. For most of us, that authentic yes and no calibration have been completely disturbed by childhood experiences where we had to pay attention to external sources of influence instead of listening to our internal wisdom. And I think we live in a very busy society to begin with, where external influences are just more valuable. And it's quite frustrating that countries like Tibet, they kept the practices, the sacred practices of meditation for so many centuries, and the monasteries are being destroyed, the monks are being persecuted. So to me, it's also a sign of our immaturity, spiritual immaturity as a collective. And the human beings that hold the power, in my opinion, are women. If we can hold our worth and hold our standards, the entire world will reshape. But most feminine has been persecuted to the point that it's not easy for us to hold our truth and our power, because there is a spiritual and, I would say, even genetic memory of persecution. All of the witch hunt, all of the trials and tribulations of being not included in history. I've done a lot of research around masters of our realities, those men that carried their pillars of consciousness. And we usually talk about men, but we do not talk about their wives. So, like Martin Luther King, Nelson Mandela, Gandhi. I did not know the names of their wives, and those are just a few. It's been an ongoing normalcy to discredit the feminine and not to allow the feminine to actually equally participate in the society. Now, our generation of women has this new opportunity, not only to participate, but also to use our voice. And it's very important for us to use our voice wisely. In order to do that, we need to do an integrated work between our mind, our body, and our spirit. And this is why Claim Your Queendom was created, because I did not see a lot of integrated women in my reality. And I didn't trust that what I am seeing or taking in here is accurate to my inner essence. It didn't feel true. It felt disconnected. I always felt like something was missing. Even when I studied psychology at Columbia University, all of the frameworks and all of the models that we studied were presented from the authorship of white men. So I had to go far and wide, from Kundalini yoga to Egyptian mysticism to different shamanic practices and lineages and initiations. I had to go back to the timelines where we revered life, where we revered sacredness of life. So some of you know that I'm very connected to a Native American tradition in the United States. And one of the reasons why it's so comforting to my soul is because they honor the mother. Native American traditions, different tribes have different cultures and different values, but majority of them are matriarchal. And the clan belonging is carried through the bloodline of the mother. So there is a lot of wisdom in investigating other ways of being, other ways of functioning in the world, not just contemporary, but also across times. In Egypt, women were deeply revered, but they were revered not for their capacity to compete with masculine, but their uniqueness, their capacity to hold a certain frequency of joy, of pleasure. Feminine body is an instrument of transformation, and it's an instrument of ascension. And most of us, modern day women, and I'll be the first one to confess, have really confronting relationship with pleasure. It's like, can I actually experience pleasure? Is it okay for me to be in pleasure when there is so much going on in the world? How can I be happy in the world when there is so much unhappiness? That was one of my beliefs that I struggled with for many, many years, that I would literally not allow myself to experience joy and would rather suffer in being in sorrow with for all of the things that are wrong in life. It logically makes sense, but energetically it doesn't really contribute to the transformation of the human civilization. What it does, it actually lowers my frequency and makes it so dense, because emotions like fear, emotions like shame, like guilt, they're very dense emotions. They literally contract our energetic field. So we can't really hear our own magic, let alone manifest in a potent way. Well, now as a mother of four, I think I mastered the field of manifestation, but it took me 10 years. And I created Claim Your Queendom to share those practices that were actually available to women many, many centuries ago. And for 2000 years, feminine kind of like had to go into hiding. So we're all afraid. We're all afraid of our light. We're all afraid of our potency, our power. And Claim Your Queendom requires courage. So if you've done everything already and nothing works for you so far, chances are I'm going to help you. And the reason why is because Claim Your Queendom takes you out of the realm of the collective dysfunction that we are currently plugged in the moment. And it helps you reconnect to your own divine essence. Not a small deed, but very powerful deed. And from that place, you can be the sacred vessel of the divine. You can be the blessing for those that you surround. Because I do believe that feminine women wear the temples, and whoever comes into contact with us gets activated, either with our sorrow or our joy. So if you have concerns or reservations, I definitely encourage you to reach out, because chances are you are pulled to your glory, yet there are mental blocks that prevent you from saying yes to your own magic. And that's where I come in. And I am so honored to do this work and be able to help. This is the magical timeline. I mentioned that, probably you've heard that already, but my Instagram hashtag is called Rise to Legendary, because we are the legendary generation, and we will either be the legend of collective destruction or the legend of collective ascension. So let's make sure we did our best. Thank you. Talk to you soon.